Hello there guys, what is going on? SonOfChelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe on this Thursday. I've waited a bit to make this video because, as I'm sure it's the same for you guys, like taking in the news, taking in the transfer reports around Chelsea, particularly over Raphinha and Raheem Sterling, a lot can change very quickly, as we've seen in recent days and hours. So it's kind of, I'm a little bit kind of cautious to make a video because, as was kind of the case on Tuesday night, I was kind of talking about Raphinha interested in. By the time that video actually went out, Chelsea, there were reports of Chelsea agreeing a fee. So God knows what the situation will be by the time you are actually watching this video. But I do think there are obviously big things to speak about in terms of Raphinha, the U-turn, Barcelona, whether Chelsea will actually still end up signing Raphinha, Raheem Sterling, Matthijs de Ligt, Nathan Ake, all of that good stuff in today's show. Before we do get into it, make sure hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Go over to Football London as well. I've been obviously writing a lot of articles about a variety of Chelsea topics. Not all of them I speak about on the channel, but particularly Raheem Sterling. I did sort of a Wire Scout piece about him. I did a Wire Scout piece about Raphinha as well, so please go and check that out if you do like some of that written content as well as the video stuff on Football London. But let's get into it. Firstly, Fabrizio Romano. As I say, when I was talking on Tuesday, it looked like Chelsea were going to win the race for him, but Barcelona have come back. Despite all their financial problems, selling off some of their La Liga rights, TV rights to get more money in, they've officially sent a proposal to Leeds, but Leeds have no intention to accept that bid, basically, as things stand. When Romano tweeted this a couple of hours ago, Leeds want to respect the agreement with Chelsea, still waiting for player and his agent Deco to accept. Barca are trying until the end, and it's from Ben Jacobs here. Raphinha update: Brazilian is waiting to see if Barca can reach a deal with Leeds. Barcelona must match Chelsea's 60 million offer or they won't strike a deal. Told Barca are trying to get that number in a more add-on heavy way. Leeds will not accept this. Chelsea have a 5-year offer to Raphinha. Chelsea are putting pressure on Deco to accept that rather than delay to buy Barcelona more time. Financials of the offer aren't a problem, but it's clear that Raphinha doesn't want to decide until he knows if Barcelona can indeed reach a deal with Leeds. Still being told Raphinha hasn't ruled out Chelsea. Matt Law, as well as the report I'm going to speak about, mainly about actually De Ligt rather than Raphinha here, says the same about kind of a need for patience, that it's all about whether Barcelona with their finances can actually match Chelsea. And there's already been a lot of reaction on social media. I think some of it a little bit silly regarding Raphinha and people now not wanting Raphinha because he might want to go to Barcelona, and this sudden amazement that football players have preferences originally and will look at different clubs before they make their move. And there's already concern, quite clearly obviously linked to the Lukaku situation, that well, if Raphinha doesn't want to be here, then we don't want him. And I think that's a little bit of a childish way to react to the situation, to be honest, because it's kind of how football works. And just because Raphinha maybe wants Barcelona, if Barcelona can't do the deal, that doesn't mean that Raphinha will be awful at Chelsea and he'll give up after 2 months. I think that's just a little bit silly, and we just have to wait and see. I do think that, as I said on Monday or Tuesday, I can't remember the last video, Dembele, I think Ousmane Dembele is so linked to this actually, because his contract actually ends today officially, and there's still no clarification over what's going to happen there. And it kind of feels like Chelsea have in some ways put themselves in a win-win situation. I mean, you never know football how quickly things can change, as we've seen in recent days, but I feel like Chelsea will get or are in a great position to get one of the two, Raphinha or Ousmane Dembele. And I think that's a real positive because, as we're seeing with Bowley, there's a lot of plates spinning at the same time. There are deals that Chelsea have lost out on, like Richarlison, but Chelsea were going in for as well. And I think it's good that Chelsea aren't, as I say, focusing just on one target. And if that doesn't work out, then we're kind of screwed. Raphinha, we wait and see what happens there. I think, there's a lot of doomsday and dread about this going wrong. Say Dembele is still there, and with how messy Barcelona's finances is, you kind of just sit there and think, can they do any of these deals? I mean, you think about the amount of players they want to sign this summer. Something's got to give somewhere, and hopefully Chelsea will be in a position either with Raphinha or Dembele. I think both are good options. Maybe you're leaning towards Raphinha because of the Premier League proven aspect to it and also the lack of injuries. But I've said before that I think Dembele would offer something that Chelsea don't have in terms of creativity. So let's see what happens on this front. Hopefully we'll get some more clarity in the coming hours, because I think it all comes down to Barcelona now, whether they have the money to really put up, and it looks in early signs that they don't, and they're not going to put up the sort of money that Chelsea are offering. So that obviously plays into Chelsea's hands at the current point. But Matt Law, his report about focusing really on Matthijs de Ligt, the defensive side of things for Chelsea this summer, and the negotiations with the Juventus defender are progressing. De Ligt is understood to be keen on the prospect of moving to Chelsea, and Juve are believed to have softened their demands in recent days, which makes the prospect of a transfer more realistic. Juve had wanted the 102 million clause in De Ligt's contract fulfilled, but the will of the player is set to force that valuation down, and Chelsea are also prepared to allow Christian Pulisic or Timo Werner to move in the opposite direction. De Ligt could form the part of a new look central defence with Nathan Ake, who Chelsea are likely to have to pay more than 40 million to re-sign from Man City. So De Ligt, let's get into De Ligt. Not my first choice option. I do have my doubts about him, particularly if Chelsea are going to have to pay their record fee for a central defender. The other side to this is about his qualities, I think intangible elements, which I always do respect in a discussion, because sometimes I think they are devalued in terms of his leadership from a very early age, particularly with that Ajax side. And some of the aspects in his game which you feel could suit the Premier League, kind of physicality, his strength, his the size of him as well. I think, quite imposing, and you think at only 22 as well, you're making a long-term investment here for kind of a key part of the spine of your team. And, you look at maybe a future dream defence with, Chalobah and Levi Colwill and De Ligt, and you think that there's a lot of potential there to really grow in the coming years. So I absolutely understand that part of it. I think with the way De Ligt's career's gone since that move from Ajax, and you've seen it with a few of the Ajax players, once they've got out of that bubble with Ten Hag, they haven't really kicked on in the way that you would have expected them to when you looked at that really impressive Ajax side in 2019. Van der Beek. I guess you could say De Jong, who looks like he's going to make a move to Man United. He's still an impressive midfielder. But Hakim Ziyech, obviously, I'm probably missing a name out there. But De Ligt, particularly given the size of the fee to Juventus, he's made mistakes. He still has had to learn on the job. He reminds me a little bit. This may not be the most apt comparison, but it's one that came to mind, which is looking at De Ligt a little bit more in recent days, of kind of a younger John Stones, a player who Man City bought for a lot when he was quite young from Everton, and Chelsea were in for, and was still making mistakes, and it took him a while to become the defender he is now. And maybe that's the case with De Ligt. If Chelsea are going in for him, it kind of now looks more and more like Koundé is, not going to happen, or Chelsea are just not in for him. And De Ligt and Ake, I made my thoughts on Ake the other day. I'm not quite. I think anything over 40 to 50 million, I just don't think makes a lot of sense. I really don't. I do value the idea of going for Premier League experience, but I don't think Ake is worth that personally. Matt Law as well made a tweet earlier, and I respect a lot of what Matt Law says, but he made a tweet kind of referencing the amount we paid for Ben Chilwell. I just think that's a very different situation where we needed to upgrade a position. Ben Chilwell was younger than Nathan Ake is now. Ben Chilwell was still developing in his game, and a very impressive player who was only going to get better and had tons of potential. And I just don't think Nathan Ake provides the same sort of allure as Ben Chilwell. There isn't that sense that this could be a guy who's going to really settle and be a dominant player in this position for the next 5 to 10 years. I just don't think the sale is quite there for me. It doesn't excite me as much, and it's not the case that Ake couldn't do a competent job. I think I said as much on Tuesday. I think he would be a competent Premier League defender, but I feel that money could be invested smartly here in other positions, or just in terms of other targets that you could get in central defence. And I just don't think Ake is worth that much personally. If you are willing to spend 50 million for Nathan Ake, I'm not quite sure why Chelsea would be unwilling to spend that much on, say, Jules Koundé, who I think offers versatility. I think would help us on the right side, particularly if we're going to bring in Sterling or Raphinha. I think you need a lot of speed and agility on that side of defence now, with what Tuchel may want to do in the attacking sense. And I think Koundé is an impressive defender who I think maybe has, again, a higher ceiling. It's the argument you can make for De Ligt. It's not the fact that we don't need experience, but if Tuchel's only looking at the short term, it's why some of the links to Koulibaly I think make a lot more sense. In terms of that dominant, experienced defender who I think absolutely brings quality and that sort of imperious nature where you need, particularly after the departure of Rudiger, that's a massive character and a massive player who was so aggressive on that side, and I'm not quite sure if Ake offers the same leadership skills. He offers those intangibles that we speak about so often, and again, it isn't one that sets the pulses racing. I'm not quite sure it moves the needle that much, and again, I think it's still a deal that anywhere, if we're going over like 15 million, I'm not quite sure it's worth doing, particularly for a player. I was speaking to a Man City fan earlier today, Alex Brotherton, on Football London, mainly about Sterling. But, this is a guy who made like under 20, definitely under 25 league appearances last season. And it's just, I don't think it's worth it. As I say, I'm a little bit scared that by the time I've stopped recording this video, I'll go on Twitter, I'll go on some of the news sites, and things have changed completely. The one thing I didn't really speak about in today's video is Raheem Sterling. He's in the thumbnail. It looks close, and it looks like this deal is going to happen, and I'm excited about it. I think I'm going to try and restrain my excitement because of what happened with Lukaku last summer, and seeing how all that played out. But I do think this is a very good player. I've probably touched on it if it gets announced, but you just look at some of the numbers of Raheem Sterling. I think it's very hard to argue against them, and I think with what Tuchel may be doing if he gets Raphinha as well, two true wide players who have proven really effective in the Premier League, particularly Sterling. I mean, Raphinha's still growing in the Premier League. I think he's got a lot more to prove in the Premier League. But two players who could really alter the way we do things in the final third and really give Tuchel a bit more license to change things and maybe change up the formation, be a bit more daring. You think about Mason Mount maybe moving into a more central midfield role that he did under Lampard, kind of as a number 8. You've got Conor Gallagher coming back. I mean, the options I think are really exciting if these deals go through, particularly Sterling, who, as I say, based on the evidence we have in front of us, is a very, very good player. So those are my thoughts. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea for all my thoughts on the ongoing news and change of things at Chelsea. We're still waiting that new kit, which, maybe has been lost in transit somewhere, or maybe they're just awaiting for these signings to come through, and maybe could do something special there. But let me know your thoughts. Subscribe, go over to Football London, check out all my articles on there, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.